Welcome back, AP Gov students. Today is Chapter 9 of Keeping the Republic, titled The Bureaucracy. If you don't have Keeping the Republic, it's fine because the content is still going to be the same. I'm going to be going over all the key terms and notes for this chapter that helped me get a 5, so I encourage you to take notes along as well. Bureaucracy is a structured organization with a clear chain of command. Governmental bureaucracies hold a ton of power in the executive branch and are the actual on-the-ground bodies that implement laws. I think the actual textual definition of bureaucracy isn't really that important, but what they are is the commonly known organizations or bodies in the government that actually act on certain spheres of government and act on certain spheres of law. So there's environmental bureaucracies, there's business controlled ones, there's things like that. So there's bureaucracies that focus on environmental policy, for example, or economic policy. Neutral competence, depoliticization to achieve effectiveness. Depoliticization is a goal for the bureaucracy because it creates less needless conflict and promotes professionalism and productivity. Bureaucratic institutions are supposed to be almost apolitical in the executive branch. They're supposed to be just, the experts and the people that, actually know how to implement the laws effectively without a partisan viewpoint. However, this really has never been a thing, and it's a growing problem, especially now, as politics becomes more polarized and just more notable in American culture. It's really hard to make bureaucratic institutions and bureaucratic workers not act on their political beliefs. Red tape, unnecessary guidelines and rules. This issue plagues the bureaucracy because there's an ever-expanding network of additional documents and guidelines that organizations put out. One of the things about bureaucracy that's in the bureaucratic nature is that it's ever-expanding and just ever-growing. And as bureaucracies keep implementing more rules, more guidelines, more just things that control how laws are done and how things should be done, it eventually overcomplicates a ton of spheres of American life, and that's what red tape is. It's all the things that certain businesses or people have to deal with because of bureaucracies, and they really slow down the effectiveness of business. That's kind of where the deregulation term comes out, because businesses want less bureaucratic influence on their own practices because it hurts business productivity, at least in their view. Patronage, giving out positions in government to pay off favors. This greatly affected the qualifications of people in the bureaucracy until it was reformed. Especially back earlier in American history, people in higher positions of government will just appoint people to jobs that were their friends or that they owed favors to, things like that. And this had to be reformed because it was putting in a common group of people, per se, in certain institutions. That was one problem, but the biggest problem was that people were getting appointed to jobs that they just should not have held. Pendleton act that worked towards civil service reform. Civil service reform is just reforming the patronage system. It created a civil service commission that was in charge of eradicating the patronage system. Independent agencies outside of the cabinet. They do not connect to leaders in the cabinet and typically have narrow spheres of work. So cabinet positions are the leaders of the large net of the bureaucracy, but there are agencies that aren't connected to presidential cabinet appointees, and they have smaller areas of work, but they do also have a lot to do. Independent regulatory boards and commissions, they make regulations. They are responsible for the vast network of government regulations that are seen most obviously in the business world. This goes back to the deregulation thing, where these independent regulatory agencies make a lot of rules, and they are ever growing and ever expanding, and they keep evolving, and that, at least from a business perspective, it hurts businesses, but from oftentimes from a consumer's perspective, it's actually a good thing. Regulations, limitations, restrictions, and guidelines. They work to restrict individuals, groups, and businesses from conducting unjust and unsafe behavior, but can be very controversial in their scope. The intention of regulations is to prevent people, specifically businesses, from doing things that are unjust to other people. And this can be seen in the business. I keep using the business example because regulations is most obvious in the business sphere, but this can be seen as consumer protection or labor protection. But the more regulations you implement, the slower business becomes and the more expensive business productivity is, which it raises prices and all that. There's a ton of economic sides of regulation and regulatory policy. I could probably go on and on about regulations, so I'm not going to bore you. Bureaucratic discretion, the ability of bureaucracies to define laws. It gives bureaucracies control over instituting laws, allowing for such organizations to approach the goal of a law in the way they see fit. This actually just got rolled back a little bit because bureaucracies had greatly expanding power in how they implemented laws. One of the things that was decided a while ago with bureaucratic discretion was that if there's any confusion in a law, it actually defers to the bureaucracy. So the bureaucratic agencies almost kind of became lawmaking bodies for laws that were confusing, but it was just overturned by the Supreme Court that if there's confusion in a law, it goes back to the legislative branch rather than the bureaucracy. So there's a ton of conflict between lawmakers and bureaucratic workers and over like how much power they have over the laws. Bureaucratic culture, shared values within the bureaucracy that guide behavior. People in the bureaucracy share values, language, and behaviors that make them committed and attached to their line of work. There's almost this common culture of people that work for the government and just what it's like to work for the government and how that shapes, just how you how you are. Whistleblowers, anonymous exposers, they are critical in airing out bureaucratic failures, as much work in the bureaucracy is hidden behind closed doors. These whistleblowers can become very, very critical when there's congressional oversight being done, when there's congressional hearings being done against bureaucracies. I think one of the most recent whistleblower was like the Boeing whistleblower or something, where members of like Boeing and the members of like the airplane bureaucracy, I don't know what it's called, the one that controls air traffic, they had to get put on stand because of whistleblowers, and it's whistleblowers can be very, very powerful. Iron Triangle, connection between Congress, businesses, and interest groups. This one shows up a lot, I think, throughout the curriculum. It connects 3 independent bodies with common interests who all work to serve each other's interests with mutual benefit, which can be very powerful. So members of Congress, committees in Congress, businesses, and interest groups all can work together for the same thing. So members of Congress who want possibly like environmental policy passed, people in interest groups who work for environmental interest groups, and maybe green energy businesses, they can all work together to achieve a certain policy. Citizen advisory councils, groups of people that influence the bureaucracy. Some agencies allow public influence on their policies, which helps to remove the shroud that covers bureaucratic work. One of the things about the bureaucracy, it is often very hidden from the public. A lot of the public doesn't understand the bureaucracy, but some of these agencies will allow public bodies and like this public councils to advise the bureaucracy and to get involved with bureaucratic actions. Freedom of Information Act makes bureaucratic records public. It allows the citizens to be informed about bureaucratic action, so this removes again a little bit of that secrecy of the bureaucracy. Privacy Act of 1974 allows citizens to know what the agencies know. It gives citizens the right to know all information and research that various bureaucratic agencies have gathered. And that's a wrap. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next chapter, and goodbye. Yo, if you're super cool and awesome, you should follow my Twitter or X if you're that kind of person. It's @Clark4724. I post a lot of random stuff on there, but I also post channel updates and when my next videos are coming out. So if you're gonna keep watching my channel, then I recommend you follow, and thanks.